If you're someone looking to get into contracting, or if you've just started getting into the game, you may be wondering, what is IR35? Now, I'm not an accountant or a financial advisor, but on my journey of contracting, I've started to begin to understand IR35 with a clearer lens, especially with a lot of the changes that have happened within the UK government recently. So what is IR35? So IR35 is another name for off-payroll working rules. And it was established back in 1999 in order to understand who was truly self-employed as a contractor or who was disguised as an employee. Now, why is this such a big deal? Well, there are some contractors who like to set themselves up with their limited companies and work outside of IR35, which really means that they get tax efficiencies. In other words, they pay less tax. If you're inside of IR35, it really means that you're not disguising yourself as an employee for tax purposes, and you'll pay pretty much the same tax as an employee. Now let's consider an example. Let's say, for example, you quit your job on a Friday afternoon and you decide to come back to work on a Monday, setting up a limited company, doing exactly the same role, but making more money. It may not necessarily seem fair, and this is potentially what is happening in many different places. Now, not necessarily of the same person quitting on the Friday and starting on a Monday, but other people coming in, doing BAU or employee type style work and getting paid more, being on a more efficient tax. Now, of course, there are going to be differences in terms of pay for those who are inside of IR35 and those who are paid as a permanent employee. But what about those who are inside and those who are outside? How do you work out the difference? Now, this really comes down to tax. Now, you're not the only one let off the hook if you're a contractor. Again, employers don't have to pay national insurance contributions. And so there are some benefits in that way, but I guess HMRC are trying to crack down to distinguish between those who are doing works that are similar to employees for tax purposes and those who are actually doing work that is not employee based for tax purposes as well. And this is where the difference lies. And so, of course, regulation came into play in 2000, and in 2017 to 2021, there were some changes to make sure that public sector organizations were the ones deciding who was inside and who was outside. And of course, there were a few other private organizations, bigger ones, who are making bigger revenues, who also had to decide as well. So if you're an SME bringing on a contractor, then it wasn't down for you to decide. Now, of course, with the mini budget, with Kwasi Kwarteng's changes to legislation and everything else around this, he said that he wanted to simplify the rules around tax for contractors. Again, this has been taken as, okay, the whole inside and outside thing is not going to be deemed by the end client, and it's going to revert back to pre-2017 rules, which is the regulations of 2000. However, again, this is not something we should necessarily be jumping for joy for, because the regulations still exist. The only thing that's changed, potentially, or will change from April 23, is who decides who is inside and out. And so there has to be the right level of diligence. So in this video, I'm going to focus on what does it look like to be inside of IR35. So the first thing that comes to mind is supervision, direction, and control. In other words, do you have a line manager? Do you have someone who's overseeing your work? Do you have direct reports? Do you have a start and end time each day? Are there situations where if you complete a project, you're still given more work to do? Again, if all of these things apply to you or could apply to you as a contractor, then you'd be deemed by HMRC as working inside, as you don't hit all of their criteria for somebody working outside of IR35. So again, it emulates that employee sort of environment. The next thing is known as substitution. So are you in a situation where if you wanted to go on holiday, or if you had other work to do, or you were just busy, or you had someone who was more skilled, could you bring them in order to do the works for the client? And again, if you can't, then that poses a problem. Again, for those who are outside, they're more likely happy or willing or able to do this. Now, of course, that makes things easier. That's very much 4-hour work week of Tim Ferriss mentality, so to speak. But if you can't genuinely do that, and there's no clause or writing that highlights that you're able to do this, then again, that highlights that you're probably working inside, or you've got an inside contract. There's also mutuality of obligation. In layman's terms, that really means that are you in a position where if you complete a set task or a set project based on timescales, can you genuinely not do anything else after that? Can you genuinely not be given any other tasks after that? Or is a new contract required in order for you to do the works? If it is assumed that you'll continue to do different types of work based on that theme of work, then again, you're most likely using an inside contract. So these are some very, very simple examples that highlight whether you're inside IR35 or not. Now, of course, if you're a contractor right now, I'd love to know, do you think you should be working inside or outside of IR35? Comment below. Now, if this video has sparked some interest in you and you're looking to become a contractor within the UK, then make sure you click the link below to get a comprehensive guide on my course, The Independent Consultant, a guide to becoming a contractor within the UK. Again, it breaks down my journey, gives you practical steps, and explains the theory behind some of the concepts that I cover on my YouTube channel. So again, make sure to click on the link below. Now, there are other things to consider when it comes to whether you're inside or outside. So here's an example. So those who are working inside at times can take on equipment from the end client. So this is usually a laptop of some sort, so some sort of technology that they can use in order to do their work. So if that's the case, again, this looks like employee mentality because employees do the same thing. There are other situations where you may take on financial risk because you are the expert, you are the service deliverer, and therefore, again, if you are outside, you would need something like professional indemnity insurance to cover you just in case. But again, the same doesn't necessarily apply in the same way if you are inside IR35. In addition to that, there is a regularity of payment when it comes to becoming a contractor inside of IR35. You may get paid usually on a weekly basis with a day rate, potentially even on a monthly basis. But again, if you're outside, potentially you're in a situation where you're getting paid on a project basis. So if you complete certain works, you'll get paid for the outputs of those works, provided that it fits in with the criteria of what has been agreed in the contract. Sometimes you get into situations where you're so comfortable with the rhythm and culture of the space, and you've got people reporting to you and you're doing activities that are very similar to those who are permanent in that space. Again, this may be a red flag for HMRC. Another thing to highlight is, are you acting as a business, as a contractor, or are you acting as someone who's going to work 9 to 5? Again, just a glorified 9 to 5 in many ways, and that's not a bad thing necessarily. But again, these are things that HMRC will be looking at. Do you have a website? Do you potentially have a virtual office or an actual physical office? Do you have employees or staff who can do works for you? Like, what is the motive behind your contracting incentives or intention, so to speak? And so with that in mind, just really think, do I fit the bill? Or if you're coming into contracting for the first time, which one would you prefer? I don't think any of them are necessarily bad. I think the difference is that with the outside space, there is a degree of flexibility. Yes, you take on a certain level of financial risk, but you are truly running a business in that sense. Now, of course, there are grey areas that exist, whether they're intentional or not, but it's for you to be crystal clear, especially with these changes coming in April, whether you fit within the outside space or inside space. Or in other words, whether you want to fit within the outside space or whether you want to fit within the inside space. Of course, more money is great, but you need to be really clear in terms of which camp you sit in. Now, of course, if you want to see more videos like this, whether this is based on contracting, leadership, personal development, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, my friends, understand, reach, and expand. Peace.